You know, we see them almost every time we watch a football game or see a football image. The stripes on the helmet. But where do they come from? Where did they start? And what's their origins? Timothy P. Brown of Football Archaeology joins us today to tell us all about the stripes on the helmets, and it's all coming up in just a moment.
This is the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch, a podcast that covers the anniversaries of American football events throughout history. Your host, Darren Hayes, is podcasting from America's North Shore to bring you the memories of the gridiron, one day at a time.
Hello, my football friends. This is Darren Hayes of pigskindispatch.com. Welcome once again to the Pig Pen, your portal to positive football history. And as we do on Tuesdays, we talk with Timothy P. Brown of footballarchaeology.com about one of his recent tidbits. And we have him here today. And Tim, welcome back to the Pig Pen.
Hey, Darren. Look forward to chatting. I do not have any kind of dad joke ready for this particular one.
No?
So we're just gonna have to get right into it. And
I guess so. So let's stripe to it. So
yeah,
that was a stretch. Okay, that was bad. That was bad.
yeah,
But
yeah.
we're
I didn't want to go. I didn't want to go that low to
yeah.
get one in there. But
Yeah, I was trying to think of something
you
fruit
do
stripe
you, right?
gummers. Yeah, I guess so. Of course, Tim's topic of his tidbit was titled "Football's First Striped Helmets" that he put out recently, and it sounds like a very interesting and intriguing topic. And Tim, why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah. So I will first say that anytime that I write about the first time that such and such happened in a football game, um, inevitably there's an earlier time. So, not always, but very often. So, there is an implied, as of what I know right now, anytime that I write about something being the first. Now, sometimes there really is a first, but for a lot of stuff like, the first striped helmet, well, okay, there's no database out there that I can search and say, when was who had the first striped helmet? Because like ChatGPT isn't going to get it right. I guarantee you that. Not today. You know, our overlords will have that soon enough. But
Once the machines take over in
yes,
Terminator,
yeah,
then they'll be
yeah,
right.
for sure. Um, so the so anyways, so I end up looking like, I've got thousands of photographs of things that I've pulled out of college yearbooks and whatever. And so I comb through those and looking for the earliest examples. I search newspaper archives and just general, Google searching and stuff. And so, um, that's kind of how I try to identify something like when's the first, when did people first wear stripes on their helmet? And so now part of the thing too is like, you get into these existential questions like, what is a helmet and what is a stripe? Right? Because like early on, guys wore head harnesses or head gear that were more like wrestling gear. So they didn't necessarily like they were leather and cloth. And so nobody thought to paint a stripe on them, apparently. Maybe somebody did and it's out there. Somebody will send us a note saying, hey, this happened in 1903. But so basically, as far as I could tell, the first time that people started adding a stripe to a helmet was in when the manufacturers of football headgear started putting like cross straps. They started putting like leather straps across the crown of the helmet as reinforcement, right? And everybody's familiar with the 1930s, especially helmets that had those straps. But that's kind of when that whole thing started. And so, but those kinds of straps show up mid-teens. And so the first person I found, or the first instance I found of a stripe on a helmet was a Yale player. He was a back, or no, he was an end, who had a stripe on the helmet. So my guess is that he striped his helmet so that a passer could see him downfield, so that he would stand out from everybody else running around the field. So like the first painted helmets, those came in 1906 when in Carlisle, again, best to my knowledge, Carlisle was the first team to paint their helmets, and they only painted the eligible receivers because in 1906, ineligible receivers could run downfield too, and they could block. There was no pass interference, blah, blah, blah. So, they needed to make sure they threw the ball to their correct teammate, just not a teammate. So they painted their helmets, and Swarthmore painted theirs in 1907, and there's probably some others. But so then they transitioned to striping, and so at least one guy at Yale did it in 1916, and then in the story I wrote that as best I knew, Utah was next in 1919. They painted their helmets, kind of white background and then red stripes on the cross, straps. Kansas in 1921 and BC in 1923, so Boston College. And so I published that, and then like an hour later, I'm going back and I'm like, I publish stuff, and then I like take all those images and I file them away to the right spot. And I realized, hey, there was an image that I found when I was doing the research that I forgot to include in the in the story. And it was Indiana in 1917. So instead of Utah being the first team with stripes, which is what I claimed in the article, I had in my possession an example of Indiana striping as a team, not just the individual like Yale. And they did that in 1917. So even though I was, so my point is, even if I already had the information that says this is the first, sometimes I get that wrong because I forgot to include it in the article. So never trust anybody who says that they were the first to do something.
I I fully understand it. It's hard to sometimes clarify and file your research away, especially images. It's tough because you have to sort of describe it to have words to do it,
Yeah,
and
you
unless
kind of
you
have to tag it. Yeah.
yeah. So, but it's a difficult thing to do. So I've had some of that myself where I've corrected
Well,
myself later.
well, and so we were talking a little bit before we actually got on about this one, but so uh, in the past 2 months or so, we did a podcast uh, uh, with Noah Cohen, who's a professor at WashU, and he's uh, very much into the helmets, and he pointed out that helmet striping, a lot of it, the center, just a single center stripe appeared, appears when they first create plastic helmets because they molded two pieces of plastic together, and then I think oftentimes they had like a metal strap that held them to get together, and then they'd kind of hide that strap with a piece of tape. And so, like the Army helmet, right? Gold
Hmm.
helmet, black stripe, boom, that's 1940 right there. And it's because they were hiding that strap. So he was like, yeah, I see what you did here with this tidbit, but they're all like cross-hatched. There's multiple ones. What about, are there any others up there? And so I showed him a couple of images, but they're not this, this is where it's like, what is a stripe? So there were some late 1930s leather helmets that had kind of a thing, it was like kind of covered the whole forehead, and then it would extend up, and there'd be a stripe running from that winged effect
Hmm.
on the center all the way back. So is that a center stripe or not? Right?
Yeah.
I don't know. And there's other examples like that, but I know it's one of these stupid little things like, well, what is a stripe? Well, of course you know what a stripe is. Well, okay, let me show you a couple pictures and you tell me, you know, you tell me whether that's a stripe or not. So, anyways,
Yeah,
some of that stuff,
definitely some interesting decor, especially when you get into leather thing. Because is it decorative? Is it functional for
yeah,
making the thing safer and constructed so it stays together? Yeah, but it's interesting and it's cool. Just like the friction stripes on the jerseys. Those
Yeah.
weren't made to be cool, but you look back at them now, I think they're kind of neat looking,
Yeah.
because they're different.
Yeah. Some of them are absolutely bizarre. Most of them I think are pretty darn sharp looking, and I've really enjoyed, like, Illinois did it. It was last year, the year before, where they had
This past year.
okay.
Yeah.
So they did the leather helmet look, and then they had the friction strip look. And, there have been others in the past that have done a really good jobs recreating that effect for historic.
It was at the 100th
purposes.
anniversary of the Grange game as
Yeah.
a junior where he
Yeah.
blew away Michigan or whoever they were playing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I mean, I think those are really cool recreations. And so I think it can be a really neat effect. And just like, I've consistently complained about 1930s where there's just stripes everywhere on football uniforms. And I think it's the ugliest decade for football uniforms. And yet the Calgary Stampeders, one of their looks is the red and white stripes on the shoulders, but it's a modern, it draws on the past, but it's got a very modern look to it. And I think they're as sharp a jersey as you're going to find that's out there. Really, really nice looking.
Yeah.
So anyways, I mean, I think that kind of the drawing on the history is really neat. As long as it looks good. Otherwise,
Right.
not-
Well, even when it doesn't look good, it's still interesting. And you write about it and you tell us the reasons why and some stories behind it, like you did today. That really helps clarify the history, and we know how we got to today with the Guardian helmets and things that you and I and Noah talked about, a couple months ago. It's really makes sense, goes full circle, and takes the equipment, the whole evolution of it. And you do this quite often in your tidbits, and maybe you could share with the audience how they can read and take a look at your tidbits with some of the great images that you collect, and so they can enjoy it.
Yeah, just go to footballarchaeology.com. It's Substack newsletter, blog, and if you subscribe, you'll get, every time I publish something, you'll get an email about it. And otherwise, just bookmark it, go there when you want to, and catch up on what's been written. And then, last thing, you can follow me on Blue Sky, because every time I post a new article, it's on Blue Sky, and I also post it to the notes within the Substack app. So if that, whatever your preference is, whatever works for you, have at it.
All right. Well, Tim, we really appreciate you coming on and sharing this history of, this great aspect of football. And we would love to talk to you again next Tuesday about some more great history.
Looking forward to it. We'll talk soon.
That's all the football history we have today, folks. Join us back tomorrow for more of your football history. We invite you to check out our website, pigskindispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. Pigskindispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. Special thanks to the talents of Mike and Jean Monroe, as well as Jason Neff for letting us use their music during our podcast.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.